The road into Sinjar town. Almost 2 months after liberation from ISIS, it's still heavily guarded. Sinjar's mayor has traveled with us today to show us what remains of his city. When ISIS swept through the Yazidi homeland, it's along this very road where the men, women and children, rounded up from the surrounding villages, were driven. The mayor takes us to the other side of the earth defenses encircling the town. This was the site of an ISIS massacre. It breaks his heart, he says, to leave the bones exposed like this to the elements, but no one has come to investigate, no one has come to document, so they don't want to undermine any findings. This grave is one of the hundreds, he tells us. Here is where they buried the women and the children, the young boys who refused to accompany ISIS, who refused to be conscripted as child soldiers. Surviving eyewitnesses tell CNN the victims in these graves, more than 130 people, had originally been singled out for transport to the nearby ISIS town of Tal Afar. They refused. You can still see the cloth ties that bound the victims' hands, both young and old. The prayer beads clutched till the final moments. The bullets fired by the executioners. A refugee camp in northern Iraq. Those who've managed to flee ISIS have found refuge here. Kurdish authorities tell CNN they have evidence of the abduction of approximately 600 children from Sinjar and the surrounding Yazidi villages. Around 200 have since escaped and are sheltering in camps like this one across the Kurdish region, returning to describe the brutality. 11-year-old Nouri Falah is one of the lucky ones. His family were abducted the day of the Sinjar massacre. Once in Tal Afar, he refused to join the training. ISIS fighters brutally beat him, breaking his leg in 3 places. When it healed, he could only limp. They asked me to go to the mountain, he says, and I refused. Again, then, they broke my leg. That saved me. The other children were taken by force. He says the fighters deemed him useless. That saved his life. Nouri's 5-year-old brother Salman was terrified from the very beginning, subjected to daily beatings. Their life in the ISIS camp is something no one, no child, should ever have to endure. The children's grandmother, Gaura Khalaf, says the boys described watching as militants murdered other children who refused to train. Gaura tells us they are utterly traumatized. Nouri wakes up terrified through the night, screaming that he's being choked, and Salman still suffers from seizures. Traumatized and too broken to march in the militants' ranks, they were, by some miracle, released by ISIS. Back at the outskirts of town, in the distance, we can see smoke rising from a mortar strike into an ISIS encampment. Mass graves, we're told, honeycomb the valley leading to the boundary of their territory. On the ground, the mayor spots a fragment of what appears to be a child's skull. Delicately, reverently, he places it on top of the grave. One day, he tells us, he hopes it will be safe enough here for forensic investigators to come and help them identify the children under this rubble. Nima Elbagir, CNN, Sinjar.